Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my video in which I discuss my judging of the BookTube Prize Nonfiction Group A. Every year I like to participate in the BookTube Prize at least a little bit, some years more than others, and this year was no exception. I want to make sure I said that because I really want to encourage all of you out there who are a part of BookTube. If you haven't tried to do the judging the BookTube Prize, next year when it comes up, and you see announcements, please get in contact with Robert from Barter Hordes about judging, because it really is a fun experience and it kind of creates a sense of community, and it lets us, many of whom follow a lot of prizes involving books, feel like we're a part of something, feel like we're a part of creating a prize, and hopefully one day maybe the prize will actually be recognized by publishers. I believe that Robert's made some inroads there. So I wanted to talk about the 6 books I read as a part of Nonfiction Group A, give you my rankings. I'll go from the book I ranked the lowest to the book I ranked the highest, and then discuss at least a little bit why I made those decisions, or why I ranked the books where I did. So we'll start at the bottom. At number 6, I put A Heart That Works by Rob Delaney. Rob Delaney is an actor, a comedian, a screenwriter who had a hit show in Great Britain for a while and lived there. And while he was there, his wife gave birth to their third child, a son. And while he was there, they learned that the son had essentially a terminal or a likely terminal form of cancer. And this really is then a grief memoir in which Mr. Delaney kind of writes about his reaction, the experience, the difference in the way healthcare systems work in Great Britain and the United States, his appreciation for doctors, the struggles he and his wife went through as a married couple, how they tried to keep their family together and working, how his other 2 sons reacted, how they tried to bring joy and felt joy from their son who was in fact dying, and in that respect it is really moving. So having said that, then you may think, well, that sounds like a great grief memoir, and it sounds like the kind of book which maybe should rank higher. Well, the truth of the matter is there were just certain aspects of the memoir that bothered me, and I have no pretense that these are fair. This is based on my judgment, but it just felt at times like Mr. Delaney was including details about his work life or about from their family life that were designed to perhaps lighten the mood, lighten the story, be funny. Occasionally it just felt a little too Hollywood for me, and so I ranked it as the number 6 book. By now we know, by the way, the 3 books that moved on from my group, and this wasn't one of those. I should also say at this point that I didn't hate any of these books, and I didn't love any of these books. So they're fairly fine and not necessarily always completely objective reasons why one book is ranked above another. So at number 5, I ranked The Song of the Cell by Sidharta Mukarjee. Mukarjee got a lot of attention and a lot of praise for an earlier book he wrote about cancer, which is called The Emperor of All Maladies. I've never read that book, but I understand it is a really detailed and exhaustive look at cancer and what we know about it and all those kinds of things. And what Mukarjee has done here is the same thing for The Cell, essentially breaking down everything we know about the cell. And if you were interested in human biology on this level, I think this would be a great book if you really were interested in everything you could possibly know about the cell, and how cells work and how they don't work, and how medical science uses what we know about cells, etc., etc. This would be a great book, but it was so detail-oriented and so dense. And for me, it just was all very subject that was not all that interesting, that it really did. I really did get bogged down. I thought that Mukarjee kind of vacillated between being incredibly detailed and writing over my head, and at the same time being patronizing in reminding us or teaching us basics about the cell. I'm not sure that you could do better than he did, but he's the one who wrote the book. And then, in addition, I thought that where the book was strongest was when he talked about specific case studies, and he introduces to people who were sick or were receiving some kind of cell therapy, and talked about their cases and their success, the failures there. That to me made the book interesting, and it gave this kind of human interest thing. And there wasn't enough of that, so I ranked the book number 5. This book did move on, I believe, if I'm correct. This book did move on to the next round in the BookTube prize. As everybody will tell you, and if you've watched any of these videos, you'll know that everybody will say the toughest decision is between 3 and 4. For me, the toughest decision was between 2, 3, and 4, because any one of those 3 books could have ended up in any one of those 3 places. In part, that's because, like I said, I didn't love any of these books. I didn't hate any of these books. There was a lot about the 3 books that are next, 4, 3, and 2, that I really admired, but there's also things about them that I just thought didn't always work. So at number 4, I ranked Come Back in September by Darryl Pinkney. This is a memoir of his time essentially working for the New York Review of Books and his friendship with the author Elizabeth Hardwick, who also who wrote a lot of essays, wrote some fiction. She had at one time been married to the poet Robert Lowell, and she was definitely wired in to the New York literary scene of the 1970s and 1980s. And as an apprentice, as somebody working with her, as a friend of hers, Pinkney, meets and interacts with that world. This is what I described as stream of consciousness memoir. It's the first stream of consciousness memoir I've ever read. There is no attempt to necessarily introduce any of the character, any of the people he meets to you, to even introduce himself. People are oftentimes just, they show up and he talks about them and they go away and maybe they come back. There's some relatively famous people who come through here, Basquiat, James Baldwin, I think Gore Vidal, other writers who are really a big deal during that time period come and go, and we learn more about the way in which we learn a lot about Elizabeth Hardwick and her writing and her style and her relationship with Darryl Pinkney. And it really is confusing, and it's a hard book to stay with and read. But I really grew to appreciate what the book was attempting to do, or at least what I thought it was attempting to do, and I thought on some level it succeeded in kind of introducing or dropping the reader into that kind of frenetic world of New York, the New York literary scene in the 70s and 80s, and that kind of confusing world, which is, all kinds of things are going on in the art world, AIDS epidemic, etc. And I really came to appreciate, what I felt like I was learning, or what I felt like I was being introduced to, this kind of atmosphere of the time and place. And so I thought that was interesting, and I almost rated this book at number 3. But I didn't. I ranked it at number 4, and this is not one of the books that moved on. So the book I ranked at number 3 was Strangers to Ourselves by Rachel Aviv. This is essentially a look at, kind of the opposite of Mukarjee's book, a look at case studies of several people who have struggled with mental illness, and how the medical profession and society deals with, reacts to people who are suffering with mental illness, whether that is what we refer to as schizophrenia, or whether that is depression, or whether those are eating disorders. Aviv kind of picks these people out. I believe there are 5 or 6 people. She picks these people out and she tells their story and their experience with the mental health system in the United States of America, for all its weaknesses and all its strengths. And Aviv is not a doctor, but she has some experience with mental health institutions and mental health care, because as a very young child she was diagnosed as being anorexic. She was institutionalized for a while to try to drag her away from it, and then she just essentially stopped being anorexic, started liking to eat, and that introduced her to other young women like her who were anorexic, who were suffering. And one of those people that kind of provides the epilogue to the book and then just kind of the whole discussion about mental health and how institutions work and how they try to, help people realize the causes of their problems and work through those problems to heal them, and then how pharmaceuticals have kind of stepped in and in some ways taken over, and mental health care has become a matter of just trying to find the right prescription and not necessarily worrying about all the root causes and things like that. And it really is interesting. I thought the book was interesting. I thought the cases she chose were interesting, and I thought they fit together relatively well, and I thought the writing was good. But I ranked this book number 3 because I had a hard time when I was getting ready to make this video, when I was casting my ballot. I had a hard time remembering details. I had a hard time remembering, the circumstance of these people's cases. I had to go back and remind myself, which means on some level I didn't connect with their stories, that, to a certain extent my empathy was not fully engaged, that on some level it just felt cold. And because of that, and because it is such an incredibly human and important story, I thought it kind of failed on that level. And so I ranked it as number 3. I believe this book did move on. Okay? At number 2, I think I'm probably the only person who ranked this book this high. At number 2, I ranked Life Between the Tides by Adam Nicholson. Life Between the Tides essentially tells the story of Nicholson himself's experience of building tide pools on the Scottish coast, and it's almost like an experiment, and then observing the life there. And he goes into all kinds of detail about the different kinds of sea life which inhabit the tide pools. We find out a lot about them. We find out a lot about interconnectedness among these species and how they react, and how they share things in common with humanity and all life. And then from that section he moves on to talking about geological changes and how they made, the way they determine the way life works now. And then he goes on to talk about human interactions with the environment and human interactions with this same environment, which by the way is the Scottish coastline. I thought the first section about just building in tide pools and watching, examining, and writing about the natural lifestyle there, I found that interesting. His writing can be a bit florid and long, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was appropriate to the topic. I thought the section about the Earth and the development of the Earth and geological changes like that, I thought he tied that in well with his first section, and I was with him up to then. But then when he got the section about people and human interactions, it really was just, it felt forced. It didn't feel like he had made the connections very well, and so that section to me was a failure, even though the first 2 sections were a success for me. And because of that, this made it one of those books which I could have ranked 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. But I liked it. It may be that it was because I was in Scotland and reading about somebody who was doing these things in Scotland. That might have some impact on me making it 2nd and not 4th or 3rd. But there it is. I ranked Life Between the Tides as number 2. At number 1, I ranked Sandy Hook by Elizabeth Williamson. This is a story not just about the tragic mass shooting at an elementary school in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, but about how that tragedy became the source of misinformation and conspiracy theories and cruelty practiced on the part of Alex Jones and these other conspiracy theorists who essentially accused the parents of being actors, of the kids that said the kids weren't really dead, and they constantly harassed these parents until, if you followed anything about that case, you know that the parents in Sandy Hook eventually sued Alex Jones, and they won a case in a fairly large settlement against Alex Jones. Williamson is a reporter, and the book reads like the work of a really good reporter. It's a pretty long book. I want to say it comes in around 500 plus pages, and there are times when you start thinking to yourself, okay, I don't know that we need to look and track down and trace the origins of every single one of these conspiracy theorists who contributed to the pain felt by the Sandy Hook parents who were already going through the worst pain imaginable. At times it felt a little bit overdone, and like she had just gotten so into kind of chasing her stories and tying up all the loose ends that she'd kind of forgotten about the reader to a certain extent. But the reason I ranked this book number 1 is it was very well written. It is very well organized. The pacing is excellent, except in those places where it feels like it goes a little bit too in-depth and maybe a little bit repetitive. But the pacing was good, and it accomplished exactly what it set out to do. It set out to inform readers about how this conspiracy theory world works, and about how, separated from reality it becomes, and how the internet and social media kind of helps feed these things by connecting people who are like-minded, in the sense that they're unbalanced in some way, I think, in their view of life and everything, and how they can use that idea of community to justify incredible cruelty, and how that has kind of created the political, social situation that we live in today. And so because of that, I thought the book was really well done, and I ranked it #1. Anyway, there you go. There is my ranking video, my judging video for the Octo finals, BookTube prize, nonfiction group A. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought about any of them, and look forward to your comments in the comment section below. As always, thank you for watching.